Let's be clear about one point. The United States of America is a great country. What's amazing is that over 5 decades ago, the United States sent a man to the moon, and no one else has copied it. Amazing. The United States has won more Nobel Prizes in every field than any other country has. So the debate is not about whether or not America is a great country. It is a great country. The debate is about whether or not its democracy is failing. And I can tell you, as someone who's been visiting the US for over 5 decades now, the 70s, 80s, I got to know it very well. I got married there twice. So I know the country well. And I can tell you that it used to be a happy country. But as you can tell from today's debate, it is no longer a happy country. So what I'll try to do is to try and answer 3 questions in support of the proposition that America is a failing democracy. First, how is it failing? 2, why is it failing? And 3, is there a solution? And I want to talk about the solution because we want America to succeed. We don't want America to fail. So the first question is, why is it failing? And it's failing in the most basic sense. Remember, what is the goal of a democracy? A democracy is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And the way you judge whether or not a democracy has succeeded or failed is whether or not it has succeeded in lifting up its people. And for a long time, the United States kept lifting up its people, and then it stopped doing so. And the data is quite stunning. Let me quote one important paper by Thomas Piketty in 2018. And he says that the stagnation of the bottom 50% of America's population contrasts sharply with the upsurge of income of the top 1%. For the bottom 50% of America's population, their share of pre-tax income declined from 21% to 13%. From 1970, 21% to 13% in 2014. And the share of income, the top 1%, increased from 9% to 20% in the same period. See the disparity? And in terms of household wealth, the share of household wealth held by the top 1%, 0.1%, went from 8.9% to 13.6%, while the share of wealth held by the bottom 50% went down from 3.8% to 2.5%. You can see, therefore, that the people are not benefiting from democracy. I wish I could show you this in the form of a slide where it shows that in 1970, the middle income population, the majority of Americans held 62% of the income, went down from 62 to 42% in 2020, while the upper income went up from 29% to 50%. So clearly something fundamentally has gone wrong. And the result of this, by the way, is that people are suffering. And you can see even in yesterday's column by Martin Wolf in the Financial Times, where he talks, by the way, about the extraordinary dynamism of the American economy and the suffering of the American people. And you know what's shocking? The United States of America is the only major developed country where life expectancy is going down. Trust me, the leading indicators, one of the leading indicators of the well-being of a society is life expectancy. And in most countries in the world, including the poor developing countries, life expectancy is going up. In the United States, it's going down. And I can tell you, even the very conservative British-American historian, Niall Ferguson, came out with an article saying, hey, if you look at the social indicators of the United States, it's like the old Soviet Union. Isn't that amazing? That shows you, therefore, that democracy is failing. The data is undeniable. Big question is, why is it failing? And here, as you know, the American people are speaking out every day. They go to the election booths, they vote, they speak, they do everything. and nothing changes. Why not? Now, this is a very important point I'm going to emphasize here. When you watch and see democracies, do not pay attention to the rituals of people going to the ballot box, stuffing it and saying, I am voting my government, I am making my choice. Look deeper. Because you will find, as you look deeper, that despite all these rituals and activities of democracy, nothing changes because the government has been captured. How is it captured? Let me quote to you two Princeton University economists, Martin Gilens and Benjamin Page. And by the way, they give extensive data. You can get a lot of this data in my book, Has China Won? I devoted a lot of time to explaining how this happened. And they say, when the preferences of economic elites and the stands of organized interest groups are controlled for, the preferences of the average American appear to have only a minuscule, near zero, statistically non-significant impact upon public policy. Furthermore, the preferences of economic elites, as measured by our proxy, the preferences of affluent citizens, have far more independent impact upon policy change than the preferences of average citizens do. And listen to this. In the United States, our findings indicate the majority does not rule, at least not in the causal sense of actually determining policy outcomes. When a majority of citizens disagrees with economic elites or with organized interests, they generally lose. Unquote. Listen to this. In the United States, our findings indicate the majority does not rule. How can you call yourself a democracy when the preferences of the majority have no impact on the decisions of the government? But what's amazing is most people are not aware of this because it has happened in a very careful subterranean fashion. You never see it in the headlines. You don't see it in the papers too, but it's real. And therefore, the result of this is, as probably the most respected ever head of the Fed of the United States was a good friend of mine, Paul Volcker, and he said, effectively, functionally, the US has become a plutocracy. And let me make it very clear, a plutocracy is by definition not a democracy. So therefore, when you talk about a failing democracy here, you're dealing with a very serious challenge. Now, can we solve this problem? I actually believe it can be solved. But because it is so deep and structural, you have to find the structural roots of it. And I'm going to rush since I'm out of time. I'm just going to mention, you have to go back to, in some ways, the wisdom of the great philosophers that the United States had. And one whom I studied a lot was John Rawls. And John Rawls said in his book, Theory of Justice, that you can justify increasing income for the more affluent only if the bottom 10% also see a benefit for them. So if you want to give more to the affluent, go ahead, but make sure the bottom rise. But that means, this is very fundamental. When you talk about your most important ideals, focus not just on freedom. Because the great philosophers who came to Oxford in the 18th, 19th century always spoke about freedom and equality. Everybody forgets the word equality. That's so fundamental. If you want to create a society where the majority of citizens, especially the bottom 50%, feel a real sense of well-being, feel that they are also co-owners of the society, create arrangements that work for the majority, that's what democracy is supposed to do. And by voting for the proposition, you know what you're doing? You're helping America to say, wake up, it's time for a change.